And on the open records request you made to the other judicial circuits, how did those outside counsel bill?
I honestly, I would have to go back and look. They were very small bills, though. They were making less than $2,000 a year, so they were small bills, and they were project based, which I think is also different. They would be hired to do a certain project.
Okay. If Ms. Willis had hired a employee, one of these 55 employees, and tasked them with the job of going through a special grand jury process and helping seek indictments, investigate these allegations, what's the most they could have made?
Well, first, she couldn't have hired Mr. Wade because it violates county policy. So she would not have been able to hire Mr. Wade as an employee.
How does that violate county policy?
They have a lot of policies on nepotism, relationships, personal. There's a lot of guidelines in the county policies. So she would not have been able to hire him. It would not have been approved. And that would be something that actually did have to get approved by the county. And because of their relationship, that wouldn't happen.
So she wouldn't have been allowed to hire him because of violations of other county policies?
Yes.
He couldn't have been a direct employee of the district attorney's office?
Exactly. He
This
could not.
process circumvented those rules and ethical obligations?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
So
Let's say it wasn't Mr. Wade.
So if it wasn't Mr. Wade and someone else, I believe most of the other prosecutors on this case make around $175,000 annually.
I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that was the
Okay.
answer. So, if she had hired Mr. Wade or somebody else as a salaried employee, they would make around $175,000, most likely.
So using this technique that didn't obtain approval and didn't have to follow the ethical guidelines of her own office, she was able to pay him $700,000 over 2 or 3 years.
Yes, and
way more than he would have made as an employee.
Way more, and also he's able to have a private practice, which is significant because you're not able to have a private practice if you're an employee. So that's a big issue.
Have you reviewed his billings?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Senator Dolezal, will you give us an example of one? I think we have one we're just going to pull up randomly, kind of. Okay. Is that an example of the type of invoices he would submit?
Yes, it is. And so
that's an actual one, isn't it?
That is an actual one. And so there's a couple things on this. You asked earlier about the authorization, that stamp that says okay to pay. I believe that's Dexter Bond's signature. So that was one where, Ms. Willis didn't approve it or didn't review it, at least as far as we know from the signatures.
But her chief legal officer did. Right.
So they would do that stamp okay to pay, sign it, and then send it to purchasing. But yes, this is one of the bills. And so he had monthly caps, which went up. There were a couple different contracts that were renewed. So he had one contract that expired, another contract, and the monthly cap was $35,000 a month. So that's where you see the total. But this billing is not something that you would normally see.
All right. Well, I'm noticing it lists the day and just a number of hours. There's no real itemization of exactly how much time you spend doing whatever type of task.
Right. There's none at all. And I also open records because in Fulton County you have a badge to access everywhere. So I didn't open records for his badge access. I was told he didn't have a badge. I was told by other witnesses that he did. So, I don't know. But that you would, if you were doing these things in the office, you would. I used to be a Fulton County employee. You have to scan, and they keep track of all of that. So you have to scan your badge to get in to certain places. So if he's doing this, even as a contractor, contractors at the jail have badges. The medical providers have badges. They all have the badges that they scan. I open records to the sheriff and the DA's office, and both of them told me that he did not have a card, an access card. But in order to do this, I would assume he would have to have one to get into the DA's office, and I have been told that he had one, and those you'd be able to see when he went in and out. Okay. But I was denied that.
Anything unusual or irregular about, this is just an example, Bill, about the way he billed the county?
Completely. I mean, you would never see this. This is what I would call block billing. So one of them, for example, it's 28 hours over the course of 2 or 3 days, team investigation meeting and drafting. I went back and looked to try and see, a lot of these were like drafting. And at the time, I'm not sure what would have been drafted because most of this was during the special purpose grand jury. So there's not really a whole lot of drafting. And, you know, we've obviously never seen anything that he specifically has drafted. But I also calculated these team investigation meetings. So the majority of the billing are things like meeting with team. So if you see here, it's got team investigation meeting. Then it's got team meeting and argument prep, and then meeting with team. Most of his billing is meeting with team. Team meeting, team investigation, team brain drain, he called it different things like that. But I went through, and I mean, that's the majority of the bill.
And this wouldn't be standard from what you see at block bill in 8-hour increments instead of, you said, 6-minute increments, or
No.
more specifically, and does not really give a lot of identification of what's being done.
It gives pretty much zero, in my opinion, identification. I mean, this is not something that we would be able to submit to a client ever. I can't imagine. I mean, they would, if I billed them $2,000 for 8 hours of meeting with a team on one day, and just research without what I'm researching. I mean, you have to be detailed in your bills, because that's accountability. I mean, that's the only way as lawyers we can be accountable. You know, our clients aren't sitting in our office while we're researching. So